Is LG's newest flagship everything we hoped it could be? Find out in our review. Hey everybody, I'm Chris Wook. The LG G2 has some seriously impressive specs and some really cool design elements, but we all know that a truly great phone has to be more than the sum of its parts. So, is the G2? Let's take a look. The LG G2 has a 5.2-inch 1080p display and runs a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 chipset with a 2.26 GHz quad-core Crate CPU and Adreno 330 GPU. It has 2 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of internal storage, 24 gigs of which are available to the user. No microSD slot is available. It has a 13-megapixel rear-facing camera with optical image stabilization and a 2.1-megapixel front-facing camera, both of which capture 1080p video. Powering everything is a 3000 mAh battery. The G2's design is one of its most talked about aspects, and with good reason, as LG has done some very interesting things here. First, we've got to talk about how thin the bezels are. This allows the phone to have a 5.2-inch screen, while the phone itself doesn't feel large at all. In fact, it's about the same size as a Galaxy S4, just a little bit taller. This is definitely not a phablet. I honestly think this is about as small as a bezel can get, before actually becoming so small that the phone is impossible to hold without your fingers covering part of the screen. But that isn't what most people are talking about. It's the button placement. LG has made a bold move and placed all the buttons on the back of the phone. Some people love it and others, well, not so much. Personally, I found it very usable, and it wasn't long before I didn't even think about the button placement, though I could see some people having a tough time adjusting. That aside, the feel of the phone is very nice. The rounded back allows it to sit very comfortably in your hand. Long story short, the G2's True HD IPS Plus display is very impressive. At 1920 by 1080 stretched over 5.2 inches, we're looking at an ultra-sharp pixel density of around 424 pixels per inch. Look as hard as you want, but you'll be hard-pressed to see any pixels here. Colors are very vivid without the oversaturated look that can cause nearly everything to look cartoonish on some other smartphone displays. Of course, a good display is useless if you can't see it, which fortunately is not a problem here. The LG G2 has a maximum brightness of 450 nits, and outside in the middle of the day in very bright sunlight, I had no problem whatsoever seeing the display, which is more than can be said for a lot of other popular phones. Being one of the few phones currently using a Snapdragon 800 chipset, we were excited to see what kind of results we would get in benchmarks. First, we turned to our usual tool of choice, Antutu Benchmark. We ran the test a total of 10 times and saw scores ranging from just over 27,000 to over 32,500. The final average score was 29,560. Interestingly enough, it seemed that the first benchmark after letting the device rest a while was always the fastest, with subsequent consecutive runs being a little slower. It's important to note here that LG told us prior to testing that the review unit we were shipped is not the final finished product, and that test numbers in the version released to customers could be higher. Next up, we turned to Epic Citadel and ran all 3 available benchmark modes. Ultra high quality mode gave us an average frame rate of 50.9 frames per second, while high quality and high performance gave us 55.3 and 56.8 frames per second respectively. That is pretty impressive considering that the software is pushing over 2 million pixels. Everyday performance was equally impressive. Scrolling, browsing, launching apps, and everything else was always zippy, and I never encountered a single moment where anything felt slow or even stuttered for a second. Performance across the games we tested was similarly impressive as well. The LG G2 runs Android 4.2.2 Jelly Bean, overlaid with a custom LG user interface. You can customize the interface a bit by changing fonts, which changes the font across the entire system. That's cool, but it gets much cooler. Gestures and button-free operation play a big part here. Want to turn on the display but don't feel like pressing the power button on the back? Knock On solves that by allowing you to simply tap twice on the display to turn it on. Tapping twice on an empty area or the status bar turns it back off. To answer a call, you can just pick the phone up, but it doesn't actually answer the call until it gets to your ear, so you still have a chance to see who's calling before you answer. Slide Aside lets you use a 3-finger swipe to save an app state and slide it off to the side of the screen for later use. Just swipe the other way to bring it back. If you have the lock screen set to pattern lock, you can use this to enable guest mode. Use your own pattern to use your phone like normal, while another pattern puts the phone in a guest mode where you can restrict what apps are available. With the display off, you can hold the volume down button to launch the camera, and it also acts as a shutter button. Holding the volume up button launches the Notes app. Looking at apps, Quick Remote allows the G2 to act as a universal remote, controlling a TV, Blu-ray player, projector, or even air conditioner. An Update Center allows you to manage system and app updates without digging into settings or the Play Store. To get right to it, the LG G2's 13-megapixel camera is one of the most impressive cameras I've seen in a smartphone in a long time. Aside from setting the quality to 13 megapixels, I left the camera on all its default settings and took a lot of photos in a lot of situations. On the rare occasions where a photo came out bad, it was usually my fault. I'm sure a lot of this is due to the optical image stabilization used in the G2's camera. This does a lot of things, from reducing camera shake in video recording to improving low-light photography by allowing for longer exposure times without blurring. Colors are well represented and images are razor sharp. That quality extends to video capture as well. While it's not unusual for smartphone cameras to capture 1080p video these days, not all of it is this good looking, and unlike a lot of phones, the LG G2's rear-facing camera can capture 1080p video at 60 frames per second. Optical image stabilization helps here as well, as you can see in the footage that I captured while walking around outside. On a lot of other cameras, this would be a mess. Seeing how powerful the phone is, it might be easy to think that a 3000 mAh battery might not provide all that much battery life, but the Qualcomm chipset goes a long way to get the most out of that capacity. After a 14-hour day of heavy testing, I still had around 20% battery capacity left, so I'm confident in saying that this phone should be able to last anyone through even the longest days of heavy use. The battery isn't removable, so you won't be able to carry a spare, but luckily that shouldn't be a problem. In the end, it's pretty hard to find anything bad to say about the LG G2, so I won't. If you don't like the phone, it's probably for a subjective reason, like not liking the interface or the button placement. Neither of those were issues for me, and objectively, this is simply a great phone. As usual, we'll have a written companion to this video at AndroidAuthority.com. The link will be down in the description below. Make sure to stay tuned to Android Authority for more reviews, news, tips, tricks, Q&A, giveaways, and more. I'm Chris Wook, and as always, thanks for watching.